Hi, in this lesson, you're going to be learning about version control for software development. A version control system allows you to keep track of every change you made to your code or files. Let's look at what we mean by that. Let's say you save your code inside of a single file named code. Now, let's say your current code works fine, but you want to add a new feature or try to rewrite your code in a different way that is more efficient. One thing you can do is create a copy of your code file and modify the copy instead. To do that, you rename your original code file to code version 1, for example, to indicate that it is the first version of your code. Then, you can create your copy, rename it to version 2, and then make your changes. This way, all of your changes will be saved in the new file and your original code remains untouched. And you can continue doing this for as many versions as you'd like. In fact, a lot of documents are edited in this way, so people have developed special tools to make this process easier, especially for software developers. Some of the important features of using version control software includes being able to keep a history of your work or your team's work. Version control software also allows you to go back to a previous version of your code. This can happen if the current version isn't working the way you intended it to. If this happens, you can revert your code to a working version and try a different approach. Another useful situation for version control is when you're working with other people. Everyone can get a copy of the original code and make any changes on their own personal version. So, what are the available software tools that help with version control? There are many that exist, but amongst the most popular are Mercurial and Git. In this lesson, we'll be focusing on using Git. In Git, you have what are called Git repositories. A Git repository, or repo for short, is a folder that tracks all changes made to files in your project. The very first thing you need to do in order to use Git is to create a repository. Let's see how we can do that. From your terminal or command line, the first thing you'll want to do is navigate to the directory or folder where your code lives. To do that, you can use the command cd, which means change directory, and then add the path of your project's directory. The path to your project may look different depending on what operating system you're using. The next thing you'll do is type git init. This command initializes a new subdirectory in your project called .git. At this point, nothing in your project is being tracked yet. To actually track a file and create a snapshot of it, you need to do two things. First, you have to add the file. In the terminal, you'd write git add and then the name of your file. This step will stage your file so that you can create a snapshot of it and track this version of your code. You can stage as many files as you need before you commit them all to your repository to be tracked. Once you stage your files, you can then commit them to be tracked by using git commit -m and then adding a detailed message about the changes made to the file. At this point, you have a Git repository with a tracked file and an initial commit. You then repeat this process every time you want a change you made to your files to be tracked by Git. You can also get a copy of existing repositories by using Git. The command to get a local copy of an existing repository is git clone. Usually, repositories will be hosted on a server that people can make requests to in order to get a copy. After typing git clone into the command line, you need to pass in the URL of the Git repository you want to clone. By doing this, you receive a full copy of nearly all data that the server has about the repository. Every version of every file for the history of the project is pulled down when you run git clone. Once you have a copy of the repository, you can make any updates to the files, and then stage the files or add the files to be committed. Make your commit, and then once you've made the commit, you can then push your updates to the remote repository. To do that, you use the git push command. Git push will send all of the commits made on your local copy of the repository to the remote repository located on the server. Usually, cloning a repository is something you only need to do once. So how do you continue to get any updates made to the repository and the code that's located on the server back onto the repository that's located on your computer? For this, you'll need to make use of the pull command. Let's say, for example, that someone adds another line to a file that you're collaborating on. They make a commit and push it to the server. You can use the git pull command to get a copy of the file or files with the new updates. And that is how multiple people can work together on the same code base. Can you think of any issues that may arise by doing things this way? One thing you might have considered is what happens when multiple people are making changes to the same line of code at the same time, and then they try to push their version to the repository that's on the server. These types of issues are known as merge conflicts, and they cause Git to have a hard time understanding what is going on once people start pushing their updates. In order to help avoid this, Git has what it calls branches. Git branches are new or separate versions of the main repository. Branches allow you to branch off of the current code and work on features independently. Let's say you start working on a project and you make your initial commit, and that's represented by this blue node. Git has what's called a main branch, and it is the first branch created when you create your repository. Usually, the most stable version of your code should be in this branch. You can continue making updates to this branch as you work on your project. You'll make some commits and continue to update your main branch. But let's say you want to experiment with a new feature and you don't want to update your current working code. What you can do is create a new branch, and then you can implement your new feature there. Now, you can continue to make updates to your main branch, like fixing bugs, as well as working on your new feature. Then, once you get the new feature working and you want it to be part of your main project, you can merge it with your main branch. Let's see this again, but with the Git commands you need to make it work. To start, you only have the main branch. And let's say you make a commit and push it to the repository. We'll highlight where in the code you are working by making the node pink. Where in the repository you're working is known as the head, and it is usually typed in all caps. Next, you decide you want to work on a new feature, so you want to create a new branch. In the terminal, you type in git branch and then the name of your branch. Usually, the name should describe the feature you're working on, but you can name it whatever you want. This creates a new branch where you have all of the code that was in the main branch at the time you created the new branch. If you were to make an update to your code at this point, it would be added to the main branch still. That's because we created a new branch, but we haven't switched over to start working in it. For that, we need to use a new command. In order to switch over to a different branch, you type git checkout and then the name of the branch you want to work in. So let's say we check out our new branch, which we called feature. If we make a commit, it'll be tracked in the new branch. Lastly, once you're done working on your new feature and you're ready to add it to the main branch, you then check out main and then use the merge command by typing git merge and then the name of the branch you are merging to main. In this case, we'd use git merge feature. And with that, we successfully added the new feature to our main code base. Now it's time for you to explore version control software for yourself.